Everyone, welcome to another Drifter Ruby interview. I'm David Kimura, and today I'm interviewing a good friend of mine, Ed Toro.
Hey everyone.
And today I had Ed on to talk about boot camps. So, Ed, do you want to give us a bit of an introduction about yourself, kind of what you're doing today, what you've done in the past?
Sure. I have a computer science degree from MIT from many years ago. I've worked at, I always lose count, 6 or 7 startups, a couple of larger companies. I taught at a coding boot camp in Miami, Florida called WinCode for about 4 years. I was their first full-time employee, first instructor. So I'd set up the whole initial curriculum. Um, I stopped teaching about a year ago and I moved up to Atlanta. Right now, I'm remote freelancing with a company that's still associated with WinCode that does their placement called WinTalent. So I've worked on a couple of contracts over the past year through them.
Cool. And I think that it's really interesting to be able to talk to someone who has taught at a boot camp because I think that there's not only so many different boot camps, but there's a lot of different mixed feelings around them. And so that's why I wanted to talk to you today because it's rare that we get the perspective of someone who actually works for a boot camp or teaches at one versus the attendees who are just trying to start getting into the field. So, what are some of the highlight experiences that you have at the boot camp? So, some of the more memorable moments as an instructor.
Oh, well, as an instructor, it's always so unexpected when you're dealing so much with people rather than code. Because I had been a senior developer up until that point, working at startups with Ruby and JavaScript and Python and PHP, and I thought this was going to be kind of like a coding gig where every day I do like a meetup presentation to some students and then go back to kind of coding and writing and stuff like that. But I've had to deal with such situations where people would start crying because they're so stressed out and upset while I was tutoring them one-on-one. We've had situations where we've had to have private meetings with people who are struggling financially to afford the class. We've had people find themselves homeless in the middle of the course and trying to figure out how to handle that situation. There's a lot of imposter syndrome, a lot of kind of psychological counseling to let people know that it's possible to actually go through a program like this and that they can do it and that they can be successful. So that there's so many stories because I taught something like 365 students over the 4 years that I was there. And so many of them have just these heartwarming and touching stories and difficulties, many of which they overcame, some of which was too much and they had to leave the course and go back to their regular lives or move or something like that. I just remember the emotions more than a lot of the details.
Yeah. And I think that's really great because I'm sure a lot of people who are either thinking about going into a boot camp today or they are currently in one are probably experiencing a lot of these same kind of issues, if you will. And it's something where I think that if they realize that their problem is not unique and they are not alone in this, that there are other people who have gone through the exact same things as them, and all they have to do is to reach out to an instructor or a guidance counselor or somebody for support and help, then they might be a lot more successful in that program. Would you say that's a fair assessment?
Yeah, we like to say a lot that you get out what you put into it, and none of these boot camps, WinCode included, has 100% success rate. And
Mhm.
I'm a perfectionist myself, so I focus a lot more on the students that I couldn't get over the line than the students that I did get across the line. But you have to like ask for help. I think one of the problems that we have a lot of time with the students that are coming into the program is that they think it's very much like traditional education, and that it will fail them the way traditional education failed them, where they were able to hide in the back of the class and just kind of coast without having to get too much stress and just get their C or D or passing grade and then move on. We actually like hunt down those individuals that we know are struggling and force them to come out of their shell and volunteer to talk more, to have one-on-one sessions with teaching assistants. You really have to get people to come out and expose themselves a little bit more because they think it's a very passive situation, that they could just sit back and have folks give them information and then read it out of a book and then go off on their own and do their homework and come back. So obviously the amount of hours that you put in is really important. I was teaching at a full-time boot camp, but it definitely felt like more than full-time. It was full-time and nights and weekends for the 2.5 months or so that the program was going on. And that can sometimes be overwhelming, but sometimes that's what it takes, and it's not forever. I have to tell a lot of folks that I know that this schedule seems really rough, but once you get out of here, like you're on your own, you have to go find a job and set up your own day, set up your life differently than the way that we've structured it. So we try to give people a lot of opportunities to expand beyond the curriculum that we're presenting. And the people who take the most advantage of those opportunities tend to be the people who do the best. In particular, if after the course is over, they treat their lives with the same structure and discipline that they had while the course was going on, those end up being the people who tend to be the most successful afterwards.
Yeah, that's really cool. And so, who would you recommend join a boot camp? So, do you need prior knowledge of programming, or do you just have to have the desire and willingness to get through the program? Who's it really geared for?
Well, I think when you're talking about these types of alternative education options, we at WinCode, at least as part of our application process, we let people know that there are other steps that you can take before you get to the bootcamp level, because it is a relatively high time and financial commitment. So if they're not willing to make that commitment, some folks will, like they used to, teach themselves how to code just by buying a book and going through some tutorials, kind of the way that a lot of self-taught coders came into the industry maybe 10 or 20 years ago. And that's a valid path for some people, but a lot of people aren't very comfortable with book learning that way. So the next step isn't actually a boot camp after that. It's trying out one of those free online learn how to code type of programs. So there's Free Code Camp, Odin Project, Bento, Teach Yourself to Code, Hacker.io, and then tons of videos on YouTube. Because they're typically free or very low cost, we recommend that everyone at least try one of those just to get a sense of whether or not coding is for them. We've had students that have applied and gone through like the intro Ruby course on Codecademy or Code School and just decided that they couldn't imagine spending their life doing something like that, which was a huge time saver for us of going through the whole process of admitting them to the course only for them to find out that this isn't actually the career for them. And then there's actually another step after that before boot camp that some people choose to take instead, which is the online mentoring, where you're doing a lot of learning online, but occasionally you can set up either chats or webcam sessions with a senior developer to kind of check in. So that type of model seems very new and high tech, but it's actually very similar to the correspondence school model that has existed for years, where people would kind of earn degrees over snail mail. This is just kind of the modern equivalent of that, where you're kind of working at home, sometimes at your own pace, sometimes at a structured pace, with these occasional check-ins and grades from an instructor. So block.io and Thinkful do that kind of model. There's actually some newer companies like Newcraft and Modern Labor that have that type of model, but they also have income share agreements. So you actually don't pay until you get a job, and then you have to pay a portion of your salary over a certain number of years to pay them back for that training. Some people are really comfortable with that. Some people find themselves like if they don't have a place to go to and a person to look at every day, then that they can't pull themselves up into getting those new skills. So it's at that point that the coding boot camps come into play, where they've tried to learn on their own, they've tried to learn through free online communities, and either it was too hard because a lot of it's very fragmented. People don't know which program to take, which one is going to be valuable, how to fit all the pieces together. So you do a tutorial to create an app, but if someone had asked you to create an app that was slightly different, you wouldn't know how to do it. So having a kind of a full curriculum that's all tied together and a place to go to and a group of people and a community to hold you accountable, that's where these types of in-person coding boot camps seem to thrive. And if you know that you have all these other options, but choose the coding boot camp route, those tend to be the best, most informed students, because otherwise they'll tend to feel like, well, I could have just done all this by myself. What did I need you for? And we'll say, well, fine, just do it by yourself. But if it doesn't work out, like we'll always be here for you in case you decide to come back. Of course, after coding boot camp, the other option is always to just go back to school and get an associate's or bachelor's degree in computer science. And when you look at that spectrum of alternative educational models, the idea is that you can climb that ladder kind of one step at a time until you stop at the place where you're comfortable or you don't feel like moving on. You could mix and match things. So we have people that are going through the online boot camps that supplement with the online free materials, or are going through the in-person boot camp and will maybe do a cheaper online mentorship afterwards in order to polish things up before they enter the workforce. We've even had people who who finished the coding boot camp and decided that they liked it so much that they were going to go ahead and get a full-on computer science degree. So the idea is that you figure out where you fit in that spectrum, and you either pick a spot or mix and match those pieces together to find the thing that matches your particular learning style.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's great information. I think that, if I were starting out and boot camps back then were an option, I wouldn't necessarily would have thought of the first few steps or then continuing the education beyond that. So appreciate all that information.
Sure.
And so, are all boot camps the same? Much like universities are all different in their own ways, but the general consensus is that when you graduate from a university, you have a recognized, accredited degree. So, in that same fashion, if you graduate from one boot camp versus another, are they treated as equals as far as an employer goes?
Well, the part of the problem with boot camps ever since they first started popping up, probably like 5 years ago, is this notion of certification. Because as a university, you have to have certain state licenses and certifications in order to grant a certificate, a diploma. And you can't just open up a school and start handing out these diplomas or certificates without going through certain state Department of Education regulations. So because, and even to this day, most boot camps don't really offer official certifications or diplomas like the kind that you get from university. They tend to offer certificates of completion, essentially a way for you to show the employer that you finished it so that the employer can contact the school and verify that you did actually complete the program. So because these pieces of paper essentially don't feel as official as college degrees, there has to be other ways that coding boot camps can distinguish themselves as being effective or successful or not successful. So the way that many of them do it is by publishing just statistics on retention, statistics on how many students who have graduated get a job within a certain time period, 3, 6, 9 months after graduation. Some boot camps just post those statistics on their own. Some, like WinCode, actually get them independently audited by a third-party accounting firm so that you can trust them a little bit more. There is an organization called the Council on Integrity and Reporting Statistics, CIRR, something like that, that also publishes stats along the same metrics. Like they use the same considerations for all the different schools, so you can do more of an apples to apples comparison. So being able to look at all of those stats and judging them on the quality of the source and deciding which one is going to be most successful is important from the perspective of a student. From the hiring perspective, there really isn't. WinCode does have some video testimonials from hiring partners who will talk about how great it was to work with students that have graduated from the program. But there isn't a standard model for reporting that. So just go and talk to some of the companies that have hired. And a lot of these companies will give you a really honest assessment, because not every person who graduates from the program is going to be an all-star, but some of them are. And they will tell you what they think. And every company's standard is slightly different. Constitutes someone that they wanted to hire and were really desirable right away, or other people who maybe needed to go through a bit of an internship or a trial project before they felt comfortable in bringing them on, or even describing the characteristics of people that weren't able to make it through the application process. Now, that can be really intimidating for someone who's not in tech, to go to a potential employer and ask them like whether or not they like that particular school. So if you're comfortable with doing it, then by all means go ahead and do it. But if you're not, you really have to depend on those published stats, whatever they have on their website. There's also just regular details about the programs themselves. What kind of technology do they teach? Is it full stack? Is it front end, back end? Is it data science? Is it marketing? Some are more entrepreneurship based. There's different levels of commitment. I think hiring partners are very interested in people who took the leap and quit their job and went full on into a coding bootcamp, because they don't always have a backup plan. So that tends to show a lot of risk taking and initiative. If you just did it kind of part time over like 6 months or something like that, and that might not show as much initiative. You'd have to kind of lean on your portfolio a little bit more in order to demonstrate to employers that you were doing a good job. The different coding bootcamps also have different acceptance criteria. So some of them have almost a coding test that you have to pass in the beginning in order to get into the program, whereas others are a little bit more open. I'm seeing the more specific programs, like in data science, for example, which ends up being very mathy, that they felt the need to rise the acceptance bar a little bit, because a lot of they were having some retention issues in various programs where people were seeing how much math was involved and were dropping out of the course. Obviously, there are different instructors. If the hiring company knows the instructor of the program very well, then that all can help you get a job if you can kind of link up or associate yourself with someone who has a strong presence in the community. If the instructors are all flown in from other countries or from out of state, then that might not be as effective a networking tool if you're looking to get a job locally. You should ask about like the team to student ratio. And I say team rather than instructors because there's a lot of really important work that's done on an administrative level. So people who are managing financial aid, people who are managing attendance, the instructors, the teaching assistants, figure out how large of a team they can muster. You want to have a relatively good ratio. I don't have an actual number, but the rule should be that it should be possible for the student to get one-on-one time with someone within a reasonable amount of time if they chose to do something like that. If it's impossible to get good one-on-one time, then they probably have a bad student to staff ratio. There's a lot of coding boot camps that are national organizations now that open up in various cities. You want to ask whether or not the local affiliate of that school has really strong connections to that community, or if they just kind of parachuted in and opened up a school. Because a lot of times when people go to these coding boot camps, they want to get a job like in the city where they went to that boot camp. They're not always interested in relocating. And the stronger the connections of that school is to the community, whether it's other senior developers that they can tap into for staff or hiring partners, and the easier it's going to be for them to introduce you through their network to companies that you can get hired by. And then another thing that I know a little bit less about, but I probably want them to check out, is whether or not the coding school has an existing association with another institution of learning, like a college or a university. A lot of universities have been hiring these private contractors to come in and kind of open coding bootcamp subsidiary sub-school type of thing. If the class is full of students from that university and you don't go to that university, then that might make you feel a little bit uncomfortable. On the plus side, if you can earn credits at that institution by going through that boot camp, so it might be possible to do that through the code school if they have a tight relationship there, and that could be a positive. The negative would be that you'd be in the class with a bunch of other people who are students in that school, and you might not be comfortable with that.
Awesome. Well, what would you say are some of the most important things that if someone has decided that the boot camp is the correct route for them to go, what would be some of the key takeaways that you would recommend to them to increase and make them the most successful at the boot camp?
Well, you definitely wanted to prepare. As soon as you have learned that you have been accepted, start doing all of the free online tutorial things, even if you don't really understand them, because it's such a condensed program a lot of the time that the more that you can get a head start on it, the probably better off that you're going to be. One of the interesting things that ended up being kind of a blocker for a lot of the students that have come into the program is simply typing speed. A lot of people don't realize that if you can increase your words per minute typing, that ends up being really helpful for coding your way out of problems rather than sitting there and trying to do it all in your head. So taking some free online typing speed classes, there's one called typing.io that's specifically for code typing that we recommend to a lot of students so that they can get used to hitting all that punctuation and characters that they're not used to hitting, like semicolons and brackets and stuff like that. Making sure ahead of time that your laptop is set up and installed with everything that it needs to be installed with. One of the things that shows up a lot while I was teaching is that we can get completely derailed in the middle of a lecture if we're trying to get everyone to code along by a student who isn't set up properly, because they'll just get stuck and need to get some help in the back of the class from a TA until they can catch up. So try to set up some time to maybe even come into the space if it's an in-person boot camp, or do some screen sharing if it's remote, to make sure that all of your stuff is set up appropriately before you begin the course. Make sure that your laptop has enough juice to get through the program. We've done some pretty amazing things at WinCode over the 4 years that I was there. I've had someone go through the program on a Windows tablet with a separate USB keyboard, which was crazy, and we never really did it after that, but it's a huge struggle. So figuring out what their preferred operating system is and how much RAM they recommend. It's important for the coding bootcamps to not have really high hardware requirements, because a lot of people aren't going to buy a brand new laptop just to go through the program. So they will be a little bit flexible with you if you have like some old refurbished MacBook or something like that. But don't expect to bring like a Chromebook or a netbook into the program and be able to successfully complete it, because either they're going to tell you to go get something else, or you're going to have a very painful and slow time like trying to partition and dual boot Linux on some old laptop that you got, years ago, or for $200 at Kmart or something like that.
Oh,
And then when you're actually in the program, I think one of the things that I tell the students on the first day is that this is not like regular school, and we focus very much on making sure that all of the students as customers get their money's worth. And if you just sit there and don't interact with us, then you're not really taking advantage of the situation. So be really annoying and be really noisy and raise your hand and ask a lot of questions and ask them to slow down and ask them to stop and ask for personal one-on-one time or group TA time, even if you don't necessarily need it, because like you paid for that and you want to be able to squeeze as much out of the program as you can while you're there. And then when you get to the end of the program, a lot of people, when they get to the end, and I have like a somewhat famous speech that I give on the very last day, where they feel just as anxious and nervous and imposter syndrome on the last day as they do on the very first day. It's almost like none of those emotions ever go away. So feel confident that you might not have gotten everything. You might not have memorized every single word or every single line of code, but you know enough to kind of get started on your journey that you can now begin to accelerate your career. We actually have on the walls in WinCode the phrase "never stop learning," because we don't expect that you will become this complete, fully formed, full stack web developer after the 2.5 months. You still have a lot of maturing to do. So you need to keep going and keep learning and doing tutorials and working through drifting Ruby or other materials in order to hone your craft. Because even myself, as someone who's been doing this for a very long time, over a decade, maybe almost close to at this point, I still learn new things like every week, and there's always new stuff coming out, and you just have to be in love with that process of discovering some new cool thing and not assume that the certificate of completion that you get at the end of the program means that you're done.
yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the things that I found for a lot of people who have graduated from a boot camp. If I looked at their GitHub repository, that's basically the day they completed the course is the day they stopped committing to GitHub. So they just kind of let their skills kind of like just temper off, and it was almost a regret. So I definitely can agree with you there that continue your education, keep learning, keep doing projects. Because if I'm an employer looking at your GitHub page and I see that, okay, you graduated on this month this year from this boot camp, but you've not done a single thing since, that kind of makes me think that you're not that serious about coding, that it's just a job, it's just money to you instead of a passion or career.
Yeah, there's definitely this sense that I think comes from other industries. I particularly see it a lot in people who were formerly like managers or business accountant type folks, where they feel like once they've gotten their degree, that they can. There's nothing else to learn. Like they don't have to pick up new skills because now they know business and they know management. And when I find myself interacting with those folks, not so much at the coding bootcamp, but at companies, and maybe I'll bring up, hey, did you see that cool new article in Harvard Business Review about Agile, this, that, or the other, or what's going on at GE Digital? They really don't feel the need to follow up on that news, to learn about those new techniques, because there's this notion that once I've got my degree, once I've got my certificate, that I'm kind of done. This is definitely not that type of industry. A coding bootcamp isn't like a finishing school. It's more like an accelerator. And you have to keep going after, keep taking advantage of the momentum that you gain through the program, because it's very easy to lose that momentum. There's a lot of people that have graduated over the 4 years that I was teaching who don't code anymore. And it's not the kind of thing where, like, once you know how to ride a bike, you can pick it up again. For a lot of folks, if they stop coding, they'll forget how to code. It's possible to just not know how to do it anymore if you haven't touched it in a while. So I like to tell my students that, who appreciate the metaphor anyway, that it's like one of those video games where you have to build up experience points, and that you get a certain boost of experience points by going through the program, but you have to keep on grinding, where every line of code you write is another experience point so that you can get to the next level and the next level and the next level. And if you stop grinding like that, not only will you get stuck, but you'll probably revert and not be able to accomplish the things that you used to be able to accomplish. The other problem, not just having the initiative to keep your education going after the program, that's important, but even the job search process is something that a lot of the students need to take very seriously. And a good coding school is going to show you all of the different ways to hack that process. So we have students who, for example, have stalked people who worked at other companies. So you go and join a bunch of groups on Meetup, and whenever some individual that you know works at XYZ company registers and shows up as an attendee at a particular meetup, you show up at that meetup and you pretend like it's, oh, hey, what a coincidence seeing you here again, when you're like actively following that person for every like Eventbrite and meetup that they register for, in order to like get your face in front of them as many times as possible, to like get that interview, even in places that may not even have open positions posted. We've had students get jobs at companies that weren't even fully formed yet, but they were just so annoying that the hiring partner just had to hire them, because otherwise they just keep bumping into them over and over again at various events. The other thing that I like seeing for people who have just graduated and are doing the job search is that they get very nervous. They get a lot of anxiety about how long it's going to take between when they graduated and when they'll get that dream job. And the problem with that is that the more nervous and the more anxious they get, the more they tend to make mistakes. Maybe they'll spend way too much time applying to places and not enough time like learning some new skill or practicing and building some type of app. So one of the things that I recommend they do is to just take some gigs or work on some project, kind of split their day between something that looks or feels like a job, whether it's a paid freelance gig or an open source project, or even coding for a nonprofit. There are Code for Atlanta, Code for Miami, Code for Fort Lauderdale, these kind of civic hacking brigade groups that are always just looking for help for civic-oriented coding projects that you can go and meet with them and volunteer for. Just make sure that you have some kind of gig that you're working on, even if it's only part-time, in order to keep your skills fresh and keep going, and to show initiative, to build up that resume, even if it's with things that don't seem like such a big deal. For those who do get a job afterwards, a lot of them are really nervous that they'll get stuck. So they'll say, oh, I've got an interview, but I don't really feel like going because I'm nervous. I don't really think I can answer the questions that they're going to ask me in the coding interview. And I feel like a lot of the problem with that mindset is that a lot of my students think a job is a marriage, and that once you're involved in that, you're kind of stuck there, like you can't go do something else. And we recommend that students look particularly at their first gig that they get, whether it's freelancing or full-time after they graduate, as just a short-term fling. Like, you're not committed to them. You can, if you don't like it after a couple of weeks, you can leave. You can keep looking for another job while you're working there. There's all of this kind of icky moral, ethical stuff that they feel. It's like, oh, is that wrong to the company if I do that? It's like, it doesn't, you have to do what's right and in your own best self-interest when you're doing this type of process. So if you get an offer from a company and you're not feeling that great about it, but there's no other offers coming, then just take it and keep on looking for something else if you're not happy there. You might find yourself being totally satisfied there, not wanting to go anywhere, or you'll work there for 4 months or 6 months and have some really nice things to put on your resume so that you can get a better job later on. So it's not just the training, but it's also the hustle of the job search itself that I want to see out of these coding bootcamp graduates. Sometimes the bootcamp itself has a really good job support program that you probably want to ask a lot of questions about. A lot of times, and I see this from a lot of people that I've spoken to who've gone to other boot camps, they feel very much thrown out into the wild. Like, okay, we taught you everything, you finished your projects, we put the check mark on your certificate, now go out and get yourself a job. And that doesn't always work, particularly for students who we find have more fundamental career skills that are lacking. I've been in a situation where a student has come up to me maybe a month after they've graduated just to review their resume, and their resume is a mess. And basic resume writing skills wasn't something that was necessarily part of the curriculum, but it turns out it's something that we added, or we tried to make a focus of. We've heard situations where I've been in situations where students have gone on lots and lots of interviews and not been able to close anything, and they feel like there's something lacking in their skill set. So then we do a mock interview and find out that they're actually really terrible at interviewing. Like, they come across as really anxious or really nervous, or they're not able to talk about technology using the correct terminology confidently that you would want to see in an interview setting. So if that sort of job support, that training isn't there, then if you're not successful after graduating, you might want to look not so much at the technical stuff, but at that basic soft skill stuff. And there's also a lot of places online, I think interviewing.io and a few other places where you can practice technical interviews, like over a webcam chat in a kind of no stakes environment, in order to get better at those soft skills. For resumes, in the Tech 404 Slack chat for Atlanta, there's a career advice section where folks post their resumes all the time, asking for feedback. I recommend wherever the student is located that they go ahead and do that. Like, post their resume in one of these Slack channels. You're going to probably do it anyway because you're looking for a job, but post it specifically in a place where you want other developers and hiring managers who may not necessarily be interested in hiring you, will give you feedback on ways that it might not be ideal for the type of industry or the type of role that you're going for.
Awesome. Yeah, and that's all great information. Well, Ed, if people want to reach out to you or to see what you were working on, where should they go?
So I'm a little bit active on Twitter at Eddroid, Eddroid. It's usually a lot of posts where I do a lot of my kind of learning and training from YouTube. So I'll dig up like 10-year-old videos on technology and find these lovely little nuggets of wisdom, and I'll post the quotes to my Twitter account. So you can find me on there. On LinkedIn, so it's just Ed Toro on LinkedIn. I have some writing that I've done there, mainly speeches that I've given to WinCode. So they're going to be about coding boot camps and imposter syndrome and just a lot of motivation for people that have just graduated. I'm trying to get more involved in technical writing. So I have an account on dev.to, and I have an article that I wrote about functional programming and how it's tied into the matrix and whether or not the universe is a hologram. That was really popular. So you can find me on dev2 Eddroid. I want to write some more there once I'm between gigs. And I'm really available over Slack. So I'm currently in the Atlanta Tech 404 Slack, and I think there's a JavaScript Slack that I'm involved with as well for Atlanta. So I've had lots of folks reach out to me there for everything from bootcamp career services type advice to just straight up code reviews or this isn't working, can you tell me why type of stuff. So there's lots of little places, but I don't have like my own blog or my own personal site. I'm just kind of spread out across all these different social networks.
Awesome. Well, I'll post a link to those in the show notes. And I really appreciate you coming on today and talking with us about boot camps.
Sure, no problem. I hope it's really helpful to all those people who are thinking about attending or have just graduated and feel like the world is coming to an end and they need to go get a job real soon. Um, Everyone's been through it. Just ask for help, and eventually it will work out for you if you keep on going.
Awesome. Well, I'll be talking with you soon.
Sure. Thanks, Dave.